You're listening to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast, brought to you by BuildTurbines.com. Learn, train, and be a part of the clean energy revolution. Visit BuildTurbines.com today. Now here's your hosts, Alan Hall, Joel Saxum, Phil Totaro, and Rosemary Barnes.
Welcome to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall, in the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have Yolanda Padron in Austin, Texas. And Yolanda has been out at a site in West Texas the last several days working on some strike tape installations. Because the blade season in Texas is so long and the repair season is so long, everybody's really making work and maybe even spending a little more money than they thought they were going to spend this year just to get their turbines righted. Because for us at WeatherGuard, it's still lightning season. There are a lot of storms, and the amount of rain in West Texas is crazy. Flooded roads on highways still, days after rainstorms. That tells you the amount of rain. It has been a little bit of an unusual year on the wind production side because of the weather, right?
Yeah, it's been high production for a lot of that area. It's definitely, you start getting all of those drone inspections in and everything. Sometimes I think it's worked out pretty great for some of the operators that maybe didn't have a lot of planning capabilities in the past. So then they're able to come in and actually book some teams to do work, even though the traditional blade season is past.
Oh, yeah. Is there going to be a traditional blade season from here on out? And I think this is where a lot of operators are rethinking the changes to the IRA bill and the one big beautiful bill aspects is, with the production tax credits sort of waning and wrapping up, they are going to be putting more emphasis on O&M. And in fact, when we were at SkySpecs Forums, and I keep bringing this up because it's such a monumental thing that we were at in Ann Arbor a couple of weeks ago, the emphasis has moved definitely from development to more of operations, but the level of complexity there has changed. Even talking to operators today, and you and I talked to 3, 4, 5 different operators in one day, CMS is huge. You're seeing just a complete flip on CMS. Everybody's willing to try something, which is unique, right?
Yeah, I think nobody loves being a guinea pig, right? But nobody likes staying behind either. And especially now that you really do need to make sure these blades don't just last you 10 years before you can repower. The team seem to really be focusing a lot more on long-term solutions rather than short-term solutions. So be that, installing lightning diverters, be that installing even just a long-term leading edge protection solution instead of a short-term one. Teams seem to be really looking into what the overall OpEx impact is going to be in the very long term for as long as they can keep the site on, as long as they can keep the permits in, instead of having it be something where you can keep the costs low, and then you get another investment and you can repower and then just keep the costs low, and barely keep the site running.
No, we were one of the sites that had probably one of the highest production in terms of this particular operator's fleet. And you could actually see that when you were there, but it does come with a consequence, right? Is that when you run turbines, as much as you can possibly maintain them, there is some wear and tear that will happen because of the rougher environments that they're in. So in order to get that increased capacity factor, you're going to have some issues you need to be thinking a little bit broader on. And right now, just because we've talked to so many operators recently, what are you hearing for the top 3? What are the top 3 things that operators are doing right now or going after, and what should they be doing?
I think something that the operators seem to be looking into right now is mainly what are the main issues that's going on at my site, and how can I quantify them? How can I make sure that whatever impact they have, I can get rid of it now or as soon as possible? They're really looking into what the ROI of a specific solution is. The short-term ROI of a specific solution and the long-term ROI. I think we were talking about this the other day, right? And having how sometimes the pendulum swings a little more towards the financial, right? And sometimes the pendulum swings a little bit more towards the engineering. And I think right now it seems like we're being caught in a very strange place where a lot of the engineering emphasis that maybe wasn't there as much in the past is starting to ramp up a little, because you need to have that information to be able to back up your financial decisions.
Yeah, the business case is being made more and more by engineering, and maybe engineering just getting smarter about it. For the longest time, engineers in wind, in my opinion, just watching it from the outside, would say, technically, we need to fix these blades, or technically, we need to go after these gearboxes, or technically, we need to look at these aspects of the generators or inverters, whatever the case may be for a particular site, transformers. Well, yeah, it's another one. But all of them were more of a technical thing. Like, yeah, we're not really getting our maximum out of this piece of equipment, and here's how we make it better. And the asset managers would really look at that a little sideways and say, well, okay, all that's great technically, but what does it mean to me dollar wise? Now it seems like there's a lot more asset managers listening to engineering, and engineering translating technical speak into dollars. And I see the pendulum really swinging back, where the asset manager, which do still control the purse strings, and rightly so, because engineers are not the best place for that. However, don't you see that kind of shift to engineering having to look at the numbers, and are starting to get the numbers from a variety of sources because they have more data, to put together a business case to say, yes, if I spend $100,000 here, I'm going to keep $1 million later. That's a pretty good business case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we mentioned that there's been a lot of layoffs everywhere. We've had a lot of cutting of engineering teams. So you have these people who have to really maximize the resources that they have and the time that they invest in specific issues, right? So if I have a $100 million issue here and a $5 million solution here, and then I have a $1 million issue here with a $1 million solution over here, I'm going to start focusing on that $5 million solution.
Yeah, because it really comes down to production. At the end of the day, I know we don't like to think of it that way, but turbines need to run, and need to run as long as they can and be as efficient as they can. So you're right. I think we're seeing a huge shift in that aspect. Here's what I see in terms of where everybody is putting emphasis, and we can tell because we do talk to the people who sell products in these areas. Leading edge erosion. A lot of leading edge erosion salespeople going around the United States at the minute, I assume worldwide, and offering their solutions. And right now, Yolanda, I mean, you see all this. What are your top 2 or 3 leading edge solutions that you're hearing about?
I think the top solutions I'm hearing of onshore are the L Polytech tape or roll, the Armor Edge, and Hontech Technos, the paint-on solutions.
Yeah, the paint-on solution seems to be the incumbent, and Hontech having more distribution this year through Sagamore, making great strides there. The shells are always, especially offshore, but onshore they're tending to get a little more traction than they have. And then the L. I mean, I've run into a number of operators this year that were putting on the L from Polytech tape, which is sort of a onshore solution to erosion. A lot of times in the States where there's dirt and debris around farms, where it can be a little bit rough. Those 3, all of those so far, I've heard really good things from.
Yeah, I've heard great things as well about those. I've seen great things in the field. I've seen people within the field really leaning towards one or the other, depending on what exactly is in their farm. So a lot of these wind farms you have crop dusting right around there because of where it's built, right? So you have very strong toxic chemicals like going into your blades and hitting them at very high wind speeds or very high tip speeds, right? And so you have to really take into consideration a more robust solution like the Armor Edge or some sort of shell going into that. In other places, you have a pretty good gel coat. You have really anything you really need, and maybe a paint on every once in a while just to make sure you get protected is the only solution you'll really need. So I think it's not just a site by site, but it's, you really have to map these out and make sure you get the correct solutions for for that specific turbine, depending on where it is in the site.
Yeah, and the engineers on staff at a lot of these operators have a pretty good sense of what's causing the erosion. They've have enough sky specs inspections to go back and go, that looks like some sort of contamination. Or yes, we're next to a farm field and they're plowing every 3 or 4 months, and yeah, it shows up there. And the solutions do vary, right? And I think that's one of the. There's not one universal solution. That's what operators are telling me. They're saying there are some solutions that are great for dirt. There's some solutions that are great for rain. There's some solutions that are great for a Siemens turbine, but maybe not so great for a GE turbine. It does seem to be very specific to turbine model and location.
Turbine model, location, what site team you have, and whether that team has worked with your turbine model before, I think are really important things to take into consideration when you're planning your next campaign.
And we just talked to some operators going back on the repair scenarios and what you're going to be focused on that are looking at root bushings and the inserts that are tending to slide around. And obviously we've talked to Onyx about their solution, which is really good, and Gulf Wind Technologies down in Louisiana has a solution, and CNC Onsite has a solution, and We4C has a solution. So there's a couple of good solutions out in the field, and it looks like operators are taking advantage of the technology that's been developed over the last 6 months to 2 years, that they're trialing it, or maybe just not even trialing it. In some cases, they're making sort of a larger deployment to see if those technologies can help them save blades, because buying a new blade set is crazy expensive right now.
Yeah, crazy expensive, and the downtime that you get from buying a new blade is also insane. A lot of these OEMs really don't make turbine blades to keep in storage until somebody needs them, right? And so you're faced with a very large downtime, and pretty much, I mean, not anything, but a lot of things are a lot cheaper than having to sink in millions of dollars to replace a blade that you could have caught the issue from a simple sensor installation.
Yeah, and then that rolls into general CMS. I think obviously there's been a lot of CMS solutions. GE has one out of the factory. Siemens, it sounds like they're going to be headed towards one. Vestas has different things that they do. But the amount of CMS going in from the gearbox and drivetrain, that's becoming almost universally accepted. The question right now, I think, is with a lot of operators, it leads to a lot of data. There's just a flood of data. A lot of that's going into like a Horizon where they can manage that data, but there's still a lot of data. And with the reduction in engineering staff, you have to have some way to go look and address it, because a lot of times, at least listen to engineers complain, and if you spend a long time talking to engineers, they'll always find a pain point. Like the question about CMS is it telling me the truth all the time? If it sets off an alarm, do I believe it, or do I just reset it and keep moving? Are you seeing the same thing from your experience on the operations side? Like, there's just a lot of CMS, and it's great, but with reduced engineering staff, we're not sure how we're going to manage it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a sad issue that's facing a lot of the teams. But it is something, you get innovation from struggling, right? So I'm sure a lot of these teams who are running really thin right now, they have so many things that they have to accomplish. They're going to have to find a way to be able to actually read all of this data and see what it means and see what it translates to in the field, and see what, if there's a specific alarm, like what's the probability of that alarm actually meaning something important. And I think something that, Alan, we've talked about a lot is it's going to have to be some sort of collaboration between all these operators, between these OEMs, something where everyone just does it for the benefit of the industry, just kind of put the commercial side the commercial aspect a little bit to the side, and just collaborate with each other to make sure that these things can really be done.
Well, I want to break right here because I want to talk about that after we come back. There does seem to be a shift from OEM technology leading the industry to operations, operators and owners leading the industry and going after solutions and then telling the OEMs what they want to go do. So after the break, let's discuss that. Are you worried about unexpected blade root failures and the high cost of repairs? Meet EcoPitch by Onyx Insight, the standard in blade root monitoring. Onyx's state-of-the-art sensor tracks blade root movement in real time, delivering continuous data to keep your wind farm running smoothly and efficiently. With EcoPitch, you can catch problems early, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars. Field tested on over 3,000 blades, it's proven reliability at your fingertips. Choose EcoPitch for peace of mind. Contact Onyx Insight today to schedule your demo of EcoPitch and experience the future of blade monitoring. So, Yolanda, we've had so many discussions with operators, and I would say over the last month, we've talked to more operators than we have in the last year. And I think just because of the IRA bill change, all the operators are looking for an advantage and trying to learn from the industry. The problem, though, I think, is that there are organizations in the United States and broader world that are focused on operations, but they don't necessarily bring in outside help. And I don't want to name them because I don't want to call them out, but there are some that are very internally focused. So Yolanda, as an operator, and say I'm an operator, we can go to a conference, we can talk about we have these problems, but we may not have a solution. But now it does seem like the barriers that were between operators are starting to break down, and they're starting to call one another and find out how operator A fixed this problem so that me, operator B, can implement it. Are you seeing more of that now that maybe you saw a year or two ago?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as small of an industry as this can feel sometimes, there's always an opportunity to interact with a lot of the same people, right? And I think there was a point in time where maybe you saw everybody else as a competition, or everybody in another company as sort of your competition to your company. But with all of these teams, again, running a little bit more lean, you really have no other way out of your problem sometimes than to just talking to each other and collaborating and making sure you together you can find a solution to get you to the end of the line, instead of just solving everything in a vacuum in the way you can. You just don't have any time to do that anymore.
I think it's one of the things about the podcast where we find out when we're talking to operators, and they'll mention a problem they're having, and we'll say, "Hey, go back in the archives. We've talked to somebody who has a solution for that." And like, "Oh, really? That's interesting." And then they can make the connection and start to help out their fleet. But now, I think that would happen less in terms of, unless Joel and I were actually initiating that conversation. But now it seems a little more proactive, right? That there is money to spend. It does seem like the purse strings have loosened a little bit in terms of getting the fleet up. And that's sort of twofold. One is that you hear a lot of operators selling assets to investment groups. That seems to be a really smart move at this point, to try to get a little cash in the bank if you want to develop more. And two, like, well, if I'm going to keep this asset, I want it to run as efficiently as I can. And maybe someday somebody will throw me an offer. Mark Zuckerberg will show up and want to build a data center at my site. So I ought to be able to maximize my value out of this thing. That's really changing the dynamic in terms of whether an operator reaches out to somebody, right? And I want to hear your thoughts of like how internally, because you've been on the other side of the wall. You've seen the good side, not the supply side. Is there restrictions within an organization where you couldn't call your quote unquote developer competitor? Or is it like, hey, if I see my competitor at a conference, we can have a donut together, a coffee together. It's not a big deal. Where were we 6 months ago, a year ago, and where do you think we are now?
A year ago or so, there was a lot of emphasis on, give people the information they need to know, both internally and externally, right? And so everyone is a little bit siloed. It was great for some reasons. It wasn't great for some other reasons, right? But it really didn't foster the innovation that we're seeing now. And it really didn't give you the opportunity to go out, or even think about going out and talking to your next door neighbor to see if that was an issue, at least not on like outside of the site level. Now, I think there were a few months, at least in the States, right, where we just didn't know what was going to happen. And everybody was a little bit stalled because you didn't know what direction to run to. And I think now, like you said, a lot of people moving towards the data centers, the investor groups, and everything. You're able to see that, first off, teams are getting a little bit a lot smarter, right? Like the investor groups are getting a lot smarter and asking the right questions now that maybe they wouldn't be asking 3 years ago. And second of all, you're starting to see just the idea that we all want this industry to survive, and we're all here, we all believe in it. So getting us all to just talk about the very common issues that we're seeing, because there's, as with everything, right? There's always going to be something. And if you have a large fleet, if you have a small fleet, there's a lot of issues that are common within the same operators, within the same blade type. And so you're able to, just by talking to the guy next door, you're able to see what a solution actually looks like. So what's been tried before, what hasn't been tried before. You can really brainstorm ideas with each other, and it's honestly really exciting as an engineer to see that just come to fruition in these past few months.
So in light of that, and as we get to conference mode, so November, December, kind of get into December, then we're into the winter time, where in February to March tend to be big conference times. I am questioning whether a lot of engineers and operators are going to show up to these things in force, and that like they just don't have the money to do it, and they're going to put travel restrictions on. The other thought is that, well, they need to go find solutions. Where are they going to find solutions at? I mean, obviously you can use AI and go through the Uptime database on YouTube. You can pretty much find any solution. But if you want to show up at a conference and talk to somebody in person, you're going to have to travel. So I'm really curious what you think these late winter, early spring conferences are going to be filled with. Is it going to be operators, or is it going to be just suppliers looking at one another?
I think it'll be a little bit of a mix of both, right? You're trying to save money as an operator, right? And sometimes you might not get the approval to go and spend money and travel to a conference. But you also have a host of issues that sometimes that's the only way that you're going to be able to find someone who can solve them, right? There's great groups online like eSig where operators can talk to each other, and it's great. But it's also great to actually be able to talk to some of the experts that they may be trying to sell you a solution, but they can also be really great consultants for the problem that you are having, regardless of whether your solution fits in with them or not.
Yeah, and I've noticed a little bit of a shift here. Maybe just because we're in that supplier business to wind and aerospace, is that the unique vendor items that would help wind operators operate more efficiently that have been around a couple of years have been vetted. But there's still a lot of newcomers to the marketplace, and I can name 5 of them off the top of my head. But at this point, it's kind of a little bit too late, right? So if you don't have case studies, if you don't have operators that would swear by your system, whatever that is, it's going to be really hard to penetrate that market. And in some ways, I think that's good, because now when an operator talks to somebody, they should go, do you have a case study? What's the business case for this? Who else has done it? And if that just lowers the threshold in which you can act, particularly with asset managers. The asset manager is first going to ask you is, well, who else has done it? We don't want to be the guinea pig. The guinea pig days are over, I think. But at the same token, there's still a lot of big players that are trying to push into certain marketplaces, sensing that there's maybe a little bit of blood in the water, that they could gain market share. Where do you think that sits right now? And having a lot of vendors come to your door and try to sell you things over the last couple of years.
You're faced with solving a whole host of issues. You don't have enough money to solve most of them. And so the last thing I want to do as an operator is give somebody the opportunity to mess up on my watch, right? And so by having those case studies, by having somebody else already be the guinea pig, by being by being able to show me that you've solved this, you've gotten a solution for the problem I have in the environment that I have it, is key for me to say, okay, perfect. You've got this. I can work on something else.
That's interesting. So, are you looking more, if obviously you work for a large operator, are you looking for someone to sort of project manage and upgrade to your project? So let me just give you the example. So if I have a CMS system and I have proven operators who love my thing, but I'm going to go sell it to another operator, to de-risk it, is it now, unlike in the past, you give it to an operator would project manage it, and they would oversee it. Do you think that we've transitioned away from that now because the operators have less engineering staff, they have less capability to do it, that now they're asking the supplier, the vendor, to not only provide the technology, but to project manage it and to show that it actually works, and maybe have to eat some of the cost to install it and to do that oversight that they wouldn't have done a year ago?
Yeah, definitely. Especially for something as on a trial basis. I think you don't, I mentioned whole host of issues, not a lot of money, not a lot of time, right? Not a lot of staff. If I'm sitting at an office in Austin and I know I have an issue and I can hire somebody to do a trial and solve that issue, I really don't want to also have to go and project manage the trial and sit at the site and try to get signal while I'm doing something else and just multitasking and not really doing anything perfectly, you know? And so as an aftermarket product provider, I think it's really important to also be able to project manage your solution or the installation of your solution in the time that it's being trialed. To, of course, it's really important to give the operator as much visibility as they want to see, because you don't want to be left in the dark either. You're not going to just hand the keys to the kingdom of to whoever knocks on your door, right? But it's really important to be able to be someone that the operator can trust.
And I want to take this to another segment after the break, because I think that same approach is happening with full service agreements. That operators are now getting more project management oversight of what actually is happening in the full service agreement. So let's talk about that when we get back. Don't let blade damage catch you off guard. Eelogic's ping sensors detect issues before they become expensive, time-consuming problems. From ice buildup and lightning strikes to pitch misalignment and internal blade cracks, Eelogic's ping has you covered. Their cutting-edge sensors are easy to install, giving you the power to stop damage before it's too late. Visit eelogix-ping.com and take control of your turbine's health today. Okay, Yolanda, full service agreements. And we have talked to countless numbers of operators more recently that have full service agreements. And maybe that was the preference over the last couple of years, because the farms seem to be obviously less than 5 years old. And they're also at the moment talking about extending those full service agreements. So maybe going another 5 years. But the hands-off approach to the FSA is changing. We had talked to just today at least 2 operators that are saying we need to have shadow monitoring, or we need to be looking into RCAs that have been published, or we need to go dig into the manuals for the wind turbine. It's not just a trust but verify anymore. It's like verify, maybe a little bit of trust if it works. Are you sensing the same thing? And what's really driving that?
I think initially when a lot of these full service agreements, long-term service agreements were signed on, it was with the idea that we have this site, we'll keep it on for 10 years, we'll repower it, everything will be perfect. It doesn't matter what they do because we have these contractual limits to how much money they go over, they go under production, will be protected. the business case is there. It's great. At the end of the full service agreement, we'll repower, we'll just sign another one on, and it'll be fine. Hands off. The OEM knows what they're doing. I think now that we're reaching a lot of the end of these full service agreements and we're reaching the end of the PTCs, and we know that we're going to have to keep these projects on for longer and have them be in a good enough shape to still generate money and not just to lose money to everybody in the short and long term. You really have to start picking out the different contractual obligations to be able to see, okay, well, do I actually, as an operator, know what this means? And if I do, are they complying contractually with what they're supposed to be complying with? Right. And then taking it a step further, now that we talked about how everybody's entering a little bit into a more collaborative state, you're noticing a lot of the problems that people are having, and you're able to see that it's okay. So here's all of the contractual obligations, but here are all of the other things that we need to make sure our turbines are taken care of to be able to get through that threshold and to be able to make these projects last and generate money or generate energy as long as possible.
Well, and this came up in a Slack discussion between Rosemary and I the other day, which is kind of an odd thing because we got on a little bit of a Slack rant, but it had to do with resistance checks of the LPS. And you think, well, that's really the basic thing, right? How hard is that? It's an ohmmeter check. But Rosemary is pointing out, like the manuals for the turbines say, in some turbines, this is specific turbines, say you need to measure the resistance of the LPS every 2 years. And under a full service agreement, the OEM wasn't doing it. And yet, when they had problems, it was on the operator to go fix it. So it turned into this really odd discussion of, well, wait a minute, if the full service agreement means that the operator is taking control of it and they're not even following their own instructions, how is the operator responsible for that? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think that has been the case for a number of years. And today we were talking to another operator in a sort of a similar field saying, we're going to hit maximum payout from the OEM on the full service agreement. So we're going to keep capping that every year, and the OEM is fine with it. So we always hit those max limits. What do you do after that?
And it's tricky from a site level, right? Because you have these full service agreements. You don't necessarily have the staff to actually be able to climb the tower with these OEMs and make sure that they do everything they're supposed to be doing. And in some of these contracts, you won't even have a stipulation that says, give me the reports to, in that case, the LPS testing, right? And so it becomes a tricky environment because you have this relationship with an OEM, right? And you have to keep that relationship going, especially for the sake of your projects. But it's also a bit of a strange point to find yourself where it's like, I don't distrust you, but please give me a reason to trust you, you know? And so it does become really tricky when it's something that's stated in the contract explicitly and they don't have any documentation for, so it gives you a bit of a reason to distrust them. But also when it's a very known issue that they either didn't flag or they flagged and while burying it into something else, and so you don't necessarily have a good understanding of, okay, well, if we're managing this together, if we're in this together, why wouldn't I want to know about this potential issue that's going on in my turbine?
Is this going to change turbine supply agreements and FSA contracts? Because the more I talk to Yolandas of the world, the more I realize they've become contract lawyers and less engineers, that they're searching through, and maybe that's the advantage of AI is they can kind of be a contract lawyer with some help from AI, but to help understand what the operator has to do or what they're obligated to go look for to check the boxes so they could get a payout from the OEM. in relationship to, just maximizing profits. And on some level, some of that's going to come from the OEM. Are we turning engineers into contract lawyers?
We're definitely upholding a stronger relationship between the engineers and the legal teams within the operators, right? And so I think I definitely noticed a lot more questions coming over from the legal teams while I was on that side, right? And so it was a lot of, okay, what could we do in the long term for new contracts, and what can we do to make sure that this is explicitly stated, or what can we negotiate? But I am also noticing a lot of pushback from the OEMs, and it doesn't just happen in wind, um, but a lot of pushback from the OEMs and maybe shortening that period from which they're liable, right? And so instead of having it be a 20-year, 15-year full service agreement, maybe shortening it to 10 years, to 5 years, doing it little by little, which is also another point of distrust, right? Unfortunately.
It has become a little more combative, I think, and the contracts are going to get thicker over the next 6 months to a year. Because the engineers are getting smarter and they know what to ask, and because development and operation and maintenance are getting closer and closer together, they're probably sharing an office right now where they weren't even in the same building, and consolidation forces new neighbors to occur. But I don't see the industry necessarily being tanked, right? So I think this all gets back to, where is the industry growing right now? And since you've been out on site and much closer to it than I have, my feeling is like, yeah, we're going through this little rough patch, and there's a lot of good engineers here. Be careful, because when you put good engineers and put them under stress, things happen, and all of a sudden wind energy gets even better. Are you seeing a sort of the same thing, or it's just like all hands on deck, we're in crisis mode?
I think we were definitely in crisis mode earlier this year. But now I think a lot of teams, and we're seeing it through different operators, large and small. It's just a lot more collaborative. If you're looking at the repair teams coming in, you're looking at the owners, the operators, you're looking at the asset managers, the engineers. Everyone just really wants to make it work and find a solution, and just work on everything together. I think there's definitely been a lot more open discussions than I saw in the past, and a lot more availability of teams to talk, and teams really wanting to find solutions to a lot of these issues. Like you said, a group of engineers sometimes can be a little bit dangerous in the sense that they're going to find a very creative solution to an issue. But I don't know, it's an exciting time, I think, to be in this industry, and just to see how we can all work together.
Yeah, if you can survive the adversity, you get honed. Having been through a number of aerospace ups and downs over the years, one thing that we've learned is that the reliability of airplanes, I know people disagree with this, but the reliability of airplanes have gone up quite a bit. And the reliability of turbines is about to do the same thing. You're going to see fewer models being built. You're going to see a lot more focus on the design and the certification and validation phase of turbines, along with operators checking. And one of those happened today, where an operator said, we're checking blades as they show up on site. Yeah. 2 years ago, that was unheard of. You couldn't convince anybody to do that. And it was the unique operator, typically European, that would do that. And Americans didn't want to do that at all. But we're seeing this really dynamic shift. So although I am panicked, and truly I am, because I think the industry is going to be, it's going to make or break, right? It's renewables. Solar and wind plus battery are going to be the future. Already are the future in sort of a sense. Once you get over this little bit of rough patch and get organized, look out. I think wind and solar and battery are going to be going gangbusters. The economy's got interest rates have to come down a little bit to make it a little more profitable. But man, I think the future looks great.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really exciting time to be here.
That wraps up another episode of the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. If today's discussion sparked any questions or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review. It helps other wind energy professionals discover the show. And we'll see you here next week on the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast.